No, okay.
Thanks. All right, so when we're going to do our habit breaker, the first thing you're going to decide is where you're going to put the habit breaker. So we've already drawn the lines on here. And the way we got those lines, remember, is we closed into occlusion. You always want to have an opposing for a habit breaker. If you can possibly get it, you want to have an opposing. We put it on there, and then we look at the position of the anteriors, and we're going to draw a line where the labial surface of the anterior teeth. Okay? Then I'm going to open it up. My lower anteriors, 3 to 4 millimeters is a good value for the width of the lower anterior, just above the cingulum. So we're going to draw another line here, about 3-4 millimeters lingual to our first line. This now gives us an indication of where the lingual of our lower anteriors are. Okay? So this is about where we're going to position our habit breaker. You're going to, finesse it from there, but this gives you a good starting position. For the habit breaker itself, I mentioned previously that the biggest thing that students do is they make their habit breakers too big. And I've seen ones this morning that were like this long, okay? You don't have to make the habit breaker very big because actually very little of it sticks out of the acrylic. So when you make them big, you just make it so it's a lot more difficult for you to put it into a good position. So I start off, as with most of my bending, I'm going to start off in the middle, and I'm going to make that center tine. Don't make it huge. Don't make it really wide. Again, I've seen ones this morning that were like, the size of a Wilson lid. You don't need it that big. We don't have that much room here. Okay? So make your first bend there. Ideally, you can play with it a little bit. I like to try and make it so the arms are pretty much parallel to each other. You can make it more of a W, as long as it does the job. I'm going to take a look at how much vertical I've got. In this case, we have an open bite. My vertical is like from there to there. Okay, from my maxillary palate to the cingulum of the lower anterior. Oh, it's that far. So that's about how long I want to make my fence. I don't need to make my fence any longer than that. Okay? So now I can just come down here with my pliers and bend it up the other way. And on the other side. Okay. Is there... Give me these glasses, please. Oh, this is getting old. Okay. So try and make them approximately symmetrical. So I've got 2 bends at the bottom, my center tine. I'm going to bend the 2 tines on the side. I want them to be just a little bit shorter than the middle tine, okay? Just if you look at the shape of the occlusion, if you think of the motion of the patient, I don't really want them all the same length. So about 2 millimeters shorter on either side. So about like that, okay? That's about all I need for the shape. I can straighten that up and even up my sides and everything, You can make it look better than that, but I'm not getting marked on it, so. Okay, now, the other thing that people like to do is they leave a great big tag coming off of here. You don't need to. Again, the bottom half of this is going to be in the acrylic. Look at the acrylic there. The entire bottom half of your habit breaker fence is your retention. So I don't need to have a really long leg on the retentive tag. you can just take this, I can use that the length it is, and you can just make a 90 degree, or I can just do a little curlicue, whatever you want, okay? I'm not going to make it in line. Actually, that was a really bad angle. I'm going to angle it out a little bit from the tines. I'm not going to make it so that it's parallel to the tines, because then it can start sticking into the palette at the side, okay? So I'm going to have it come, about a 45 degree angle like that. So I'll bring it over there. That's a kind of ugly tag, but I don't really care, okay? Myself personally, I don't usually do something like that. I would usually just put a 90 degree angle, okay? And now, ideally, I don't want to leave these tines so that they're lined up nice and straight. I want to take each tine and give it just a little bit of a curve. So I'm going to grab it at the bottom bend here, and I'm just going to bend it in a little so that the entire structure has just a little bit of a curve when you look at it from the occlusal. Okay? And I'm going to have to play with these retention a little. But now, my habit breaker should fit about like that. Okay? And that's about all you need. Now, if you want to double check before you do your acrylic, what you can do is just put a little blob of your utility wax there and hold it in place, and then you can check its positioning against the lower occlusion. Okay?
You have to put straight or oblique?
I like to have it at just a little bit of an angle, like that. Okay? What I want to do if I'm looking what I want to do is I want to have the tines so they kind of just come to the line. You might get a better shot on the TV there. I want the tines to come just about on the line like that, because that tells me that they're approximately like just lingual to my cingulums. Okay? And now, is there a piece of utility wax handy? The way that, so I said that there's a couple of ways, if not, don't worry about it. There's a couple of ways that you can incorporate this into the acrylic. The one way is just to take this and put it aside, like our soldered hauling. And then with the Adams clasps on, go ahead and sprinkle your acrylic. Okay? After you've sprinkled the acrylic, you can trim a groove here where you want this to go, and then just add that as a repair. Okay? What that lets you do is it lets you trim all of this acrylic before you add the fence, because the most annoying thing about these is that trimming and polishing around this fence is a pain in the butt. Okay? So if you go ahead and do your acrylic work, and then you can trim and polish this, at least pumice it, and then you cut a groove, and you can take this, here, let's do it on this one. You can cut a groove in the acrylic, take this, position it in the groove right where you want it, and then just do it as a repair. Really easy to do as a repair. Okay? That works really well, especially if it's your first one. For myself in the lab, I want to do it all at once because I don't want to spend the time of the double process. So that's where I take the piece of utility wax, I stick this, Allison, do we have a little bit of utility wax handy, please? So I'm going to stick this into the utility wax. Allison seems to know where utility wax is. Cool! Thank you.
You're welcome.
That word so dates me, doesn't it?
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take my fence and stick it in the utility wax like that, and I'm gonna take my utility wax and just stick it onto my canines. Now I can move this all around wherever I want. because the wax is nice and flexible. I'm gonna make sure that my wire is suspended just off of the pallet so that I've got, you know, a millimeter or two of acrylic under the entire thing. And there we go. I can just go ahead and sprinkle this. This saves me the time in sprinkling, and it just makes it so it's a little more awkward doing the trimming and polishing. But if you sprinkle careful, it's not much. Again, it's 1, 2, 3. It doesn't make a difference really. Your acrylic is going to be relatively thick in this area under your habit breaker fence. Okay. I was saying the thing that I see with students is just burying the entire fence in their acrylic and then having to try to dig the fence out afterwards. Don't do that. Do your acrylic so it's about, it's about halfway. It doesn't even have to be a half, a quarter of the way up the fence. Okay, but do make sure that you include your entire fence. The other thing students will sometimes do is they'll only put acrylic over the tags, and they'll leave the rest of the fence out of. That's just going to bend in the patient's mouth. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, any questions? No? Everybody's good?
How do you polish in between
You polish in between very carefully. So use your burrs. You're going to do a lot of this with your handpiece. The more that you do with your handpiece, smoothing the acrylic, it's going to be much easier to polish. So I very gently go in there with small carbides, but I don't go right to the wire. I'll clear around the wire with my scalpel. And then I'll go in again with my burrs on very low speed to smooth it as much as possible. And then what I'll do is I have these wonderful rubber points which are meant for acrylic. And guess what? The third-year students bought some of those for 9 Miles of Smiles, and they have these rubber points that you can get in there and make it a lot easier to polish. Now, you can also use your regular rubber wheels that you use for like Crown and Bridge and cast partials. However, they're too hard and they're too fine. They don't do a wonderful job of the acrylic. The benefit of them is that you can get a small point on them, and it'll let you get into some of those areas. But the big thing with this polishing is do as much of it as you can with your handpiece. Trim it as beautifully smooth as you can before you try and pumice it. If you leave this rough and try and pumice it, it's going to be really difficult. Actually pumicing around the wires, you're going to use the big bristle brush, the BRB 80, the one with the 3 layers of bristles and the 2 layers of felt. That's going to let you get around those wires much better. Okay?
No, we don't have that.
You don't have, but you have a big black.
Yeah.
You have a big black one with bristles and a plastic center, like a blue plastic. Yeah, that one will do. Okay. Anything else? Bye.